Most interview prep is completely useless for either client or candidate. And what I'm going to do is show you how to break that loop and get some real value out of your interview prep process. By the end of this video, you're going to be able to prep your clients and your candidates in such a way that if they want to, they'll be able to convince each other to take the process forward and get on with working with each other and paying your fees. My name's Stephen Long. I've spent nearly 30 years training tens of thousands of recruitment consultants to be more successful, improve their revenue and improve their lives as a result. And these techniques are not based on what should work or might work or could work or ought to work or sounds good. They're just based on years of research and practical application, because I've run my own recruitment desk. I've been where you are. I've done the hard work in the trenches. I've made the billings. I managed to build my own recruitment desk to about £800,000 worth of revenue. That took me just under 12 months to reach that point. And I've founded, built and sold my own search firm along the way as well. So this isn't theory, this is practical application. And let me explain, first of all, why the majority of interview prep that the majority of recruitment consultants do is pretty much valueless. Now, this may or may not apply to you. I'm sure it probably doesn't apply to you. I'm sure that you know exactly what you're doing, exactly how to do it. And I'm sure that your clients and candidates, when they come off a prep call with you, start waving their pants in the air going, "Oh my God, that was the most amazing experience of my life." Or maybe not. And I'm not suggesting that's a necessary outcome, by the way, even a desirable outcome, by the way. But let me explain why most prep isn't really worth doing. It's because we're not really prepping person A for person B. We might be preparing person A for situation B, but we're not really preparing the person for the person. We're not really getting into what's going to make that person attractive, appealing, a worthwhile investment of time, effort and trouble to the other person. We're not really getting into what makes people tick and how to use that in an interview process. So let me give you the 4 questions that you need to answer from every single one of your clients and candidates. They may sound fairly straightforward, but they're not. They may sound fairly obvious, but they're not. One of 2 of them might sound a bit, isn't that, how, what? How do you mean? But don't worry, we'll get there in the end. So let me first of all introduce you to the 4 key questions to motivate people, build their desire, and ultimately prep them for the interview and hiring process. Before I get into the first question, let me just give you a bit of context. All of these questions, all this process applies equally whether you're in a candidate short market or a client short market. Whether the hard work is going to be convincing the candidate to go for the role or the client to go for the candidate doesn't matter, because you're briefing both sides of that conversation so that they can convince each other that they're right for each other. It's kind of like a dating process almost, but we're going to be a bit more sophisticated than most of the algorithms out there. So the first of the 4 questions is to drill down into what each party wants and doesn't want. Well, hang on, Stephen, surely what they don't want is the exact opposite of what they do want. Well, yeah, if people were logical and rational, then that would make complete sense. But people aren't logical, they're not rational. In fact, common sense is very rarely common practice. So if I ask a candidate what they want from their ideal role, they'll probably give me some kind of, knee-jerk reaction that they think they're supposed to say, or something they read in a book or saw on YouTube and it was, really interesting. Same with the clients. They'll tell me what they've got written in the job spec, or what HR's told them to say, or what their boss has said they should be looking for, but it's not really what they want necessarily. And simply reversing the process. So if I ask you, what are you looking for in the ideal recruitment role for you? Now, I don't mean what you think you're supposed to say. I don't mean what you've said before. I mean what you really, really want. Now, most people find it very difficult to articulate to themselves, let alone to an outsider, to another person, what it is they really want. So if you flip the question on its head and say, okay, what is it you don't want? What is it you want to avoid? What is it you want less of? What would the job from hell look like? What would the candidate from hell look like? Those questions people will answer in a heartbeat. It sounds perverse, but it works like a treat. So make sure you clarify both what they want and don't want, because those two things will rarely be the same. If you've got a conflict between what they say they want and what they say they don't want, feel free to throw what they want in the bin and just focus on what they don't want, because that's probably the real story, because it's what they don't talk about that often. The second set of questions is about why. Why do they want those things? Why do they want to avoid those things? Why is that important to them? Why does that matter? Why will it help them? Why will it make their lives or their jobs easier? Why will it make them more successful as a business or as a candidate? Why? Now, let me just pause for a second. At this point, you've already got much more than most recruitment consultants do. Most recruitment consultants will do a very superficial job of what kind of role somebody's looking for. They'll do a very superficial job of what kind of candidate is somebody looking for, and you've got a job description or a person spec. And that's what's the term? It's bullshit. That's just nonsense. That's not really going to give you the ability to influence anything. At that point, you're just putting two warm bodies in a room and hoping there's some chemistry. If you want to get beyond that, drilling down into what somebody really wants, what they really want to avoid, and why, is going to give you a massive understanding about how to motivate and inspire that client or that candidate. And I'll introduce you to the magic bit in a second. The third question is one of those that'll sound a bit, sorry, how do you mean? It's when you say to somebody, how will you know that this opportunity is going to give you those things? How will you know that this person is going to deliver that for you? How will you know? Now, when you first ask that question, you'll get something quite superficial and fact-based. And they'll say, oh, because they've got exactly the right experience, or oh, because their corporate goals and values are aligned with mine as a person. Yeah. Keep digging. Dig a little further down. And eventually, what you'll get is because they do this, because they say that, because I can see how they've done this in the past, because I understand why they did that in the past. I can appreciate why they want this in the future. I can appreciate how they're going to do this. There's going to be something that's based on an action. It's going to be based on something they said, something they've heard, something they've seen, sensory based. It's going to be around some piece of evidence. The answer to how will you know is always some piece of evidence. It's not that vague statement of, oh, their corporate values align with mine. How do you know? Well, because I saw it written on a piece of paper. Well, yeah, but how would you know that they really live those values? Now you're going to get an answer. Does that make sense? Brilliant. Fourth question. What has to happen for you to be certain that they'll deliver for you? Hang on, Stephen, isn't that just a slightly different wording of the last thing? No, it's not. The third question was, how will you know that they'll deliver for you? How will you know that they'll do this, that, the other? And it will be something they've said or something they do or something they've shown them. But how somebody's convinced and what makes them take action is a slightly different thing, because how will you know is based on some kind of evidence. But what has to happen for you to be certain? What has to happen for you to be convinced? What has to happen for you to know? That is going to be some kind of process. That will be some kind of sequence of steps. Might be 1 or 2 steps, might be 6 steps, but there'll be some way that they are convinced. It could be as simple as, oh, well, I had a chat with them and they sounded really credible and that's enough for me. Excuse me. It could be that they say, well, I had a chat with them and then I spoke with 3 or 4 of their colleagues and they all said exactly the same thing. It might be, I was talking to them about their values, and when they talked about it, it wasn't just the mission statement, it was their interpretation of the mission statement, and it all really aligned. It really, really spoke to me. Whatever it is, whatever that process is the process that you will want to follow in order to convince the client or the candidate. So let's take a step back for a second. We've asked 4 questions. And by the way, we're not asking these 4 questions in the interview prep. We're asking these 4 questions right at the start. We're either doing it at the job order stage, where we're taking the job specification, the assignment from the client, or we're taking it at the screening interview where we're going through the CV with somebody. We're going through that first screening call with a candidate. And we're going to get these 4 questions that early in the conversation. And we're going to make sure we capture that information in the CRM system, in our notes, wherever you is most appropriate. But you capture it early and you come back to it just to double check it as you go through the process. Then, and this is the magic bit, let me just recap for a second. What you now know is what they want and don't want, why that matters to them, how they know that this opportunity or this candidate will deliver on it, and what has to happen for them to be convinced. What, why, how, and what. With those 4 smashing little bits of information, you can now do the magic. If you're the client, what do you think my prep consists of for you? Well, I'll make sure you've got a private meeting room, or I'll make sure you've got the Zoom call organised, or I'll do the logistics. But what information am I going to give you? I'm going to tell you what the candidate wants, why, how they'll know that you're the right firm for them, and what you have to do to convince them. If you're the candidate, I'll make sure you've got all the logistics sorted out. I'll make sure you've got time set aside. I'll make sure you know how to get onto the Zoom call or get to the offices. And then I will tell you what the hiring manager, not the firm, what the hiring manager wants, why, how they'll know that you're the right person for them, and what you have to do to convince them. Now, if you're a candidate or a client and you know what somebody wants, why, how they'll know to find it, and what you have to do to convince them, I would suggest that you're probably pretty well prepped for the next conversation. What would you think? If you found this video useful, and I hope you have, please put a tick down below and hit the subscribe button, because we don't want you missing out on any more of the good recruitment goodness. And if you have any questions, or if you want to give me any feedback or thoughts or comments, put them down in the comments box. I read every comment and I reply personally to everything that goes in there. Hit the notification bell so that you get told about the next videos coming through, and I'll see you in the next video.